In part 2, as with the days passing by, John becomes increasingly popular in New London. He attends parties regularly, gets the attention of women, and the alphas are also intrigued by his presence. In one such party, he gathers a bunch of alphas and explains about the life he used to live in savage lands. To entertain them, he even makes up some random hypothetical stories where he killed several people at once. Hearing this, the people at the party start assuming that John is a dangerous savage, with whom no one should mess with. However, all this takes a toll on John. Despite getting all the attention he wished for, everything has become monotonous and repetitive for him. John also realizes that all people get close to him because they find him amusing, not because of his personality. They simply want to uplift their social status by getting close to the barbaric savage, who has become the talk of the city. One day, after John and his caretaker, Bernard, get ready to leave home after a party, John expresses his desire to wander off and explore the town. Bernard states that it's dangerous to travel alone, as he might get lost, but John reassures him that he will be fine. Then, after Bernard leaves, John sits in the metro and reaches the last station, where he surprisingly bumps into Lenina. She is the only one who treats him for his true self and not his popularity. Hence, John decides to take her out on a date. He convinces her to come with him and leads her to the Epsilon's department, where all people are supposed to have no feelings and opinions. Since John has no Indra chip installed in his eye, no one can track him. But Lenina, who is always strict to the rules of New London, finds the adventure a bit risky. However, John convinces her to take off her chip, and with this, the two get on the Epsilon train and wander off. There, they come across endless acres of green space, where technology is still primitive. John gazes at the beautiful scenery, and tells Lenina that heaven was always present right in front of them, but they just could not see it. Once they get out of the train, Lenina starts acting anxious, and keeps saying that they should return, but John insists on staying. He empathizes with the Epsilons and reveals that he, too, lived a similar life back in the savage lands. He was always bullied, looked upon and mistreated by others, as they thought he was a loser. However, despite all that, he still misses his home, where people at least had opinions and could do whatever they desired. But here in New London, everything has to be in accordance with Indra, which is extremely boring. Elsewhere, Bernard learns from John's personal assistant, Gary, that he has been missing since last night. Afraid, Bernard searches for the savage everywhere, but fails to find him. That evening, he, along with other Alpha Plus members of New London, are invited to a feast, which is taking place to inaugurate the new director of the city, Henry. As usual, John is also invited for the amusement of others, but Bernard makes an excuse that the savage is suffering from morning sickness. Soon, the feast begins and Henry gives an inspiring speech. However, Bernard, who always thinks he's better than Henry, gets up from his seat and starts bragging about himself. He mentions his time in the savage lands where he got shot, drove a car, and hid from assailants. He also talks about how he is very close to the popular guy, John, and knows each and every detail about him. But sadly, no one amongst the attendees, not even Watson, finds his speech interesting. Instead, they find it embarrassing and ask him to sit down. Back in the Epsilon lands, John and Lenina continue exploring the place. John plucks a peach from a tree and explains to Lenina that this is freedom, where anyone can grow plants, hunt animals, and enjoy the hard-earned food. Lenina, who is very new to all this, doesn't understand much, but she is still curious. To make her understand more, John closes her eyes and makes her imagine a world where people have free will and are not governed by a dictator like Indra. He also suggests they go and hunt some fish. That night, two go by a waterfall and try to hunt for some fish, but in the heat of the moment, they start making out. One thing leads to another and the two even have intercourse near the waterfall, under the full moon. In this way, they start a relationship. Elsewhere, a drunk Bernard is back to his room, where Watson is trying to console him that he is also an important member of the city. Bernard wants to be noticed, but Watson reveals that if someone wants to be noticed, they have to do something new. But if that something is done every day, people will get bored and stop noticing it. Hearing this, an idea strikes Bernard's mind. In the next scene, John finally returns home after his intimate session with Lenina. However, as he is about to proceed towards his room, Bernard stops him. He doesn't ask where he was, and simply says that it's over. John is confused by the statement, and Bernard replies that all his partying, playing around, and attention days are over. This is because no one finds him amusing anymore, as he is just a savage. This expectedly enraged John, and he warns Bernard to stop talking, but the latter doesn't listen. And as the personal assistant, Gary, watches on, the two start fighting. Surprisingly, this was only Bernard's trick to get popular, as through Gary's Indra, all the people of New London are watching the fight unfold. John is also in on the act, and he lets Bernard hit with a few punches, making it seem like it's a real fight. The next day, we see that John and Lenina have started dating each other. Although the latter is not used to the term dating as in New London, one-night stands are the culture, but John tells her not to worry. He reassures her that everything will pan out the right way when the time comes. As Lenina prepares to leave, she brings out John's MP3 player that he had taken from his house in Savage Lands. John turns on the MP3 player and gets emotional when he hears real music for the first time in months. After Lenina gets out of the room, she puts on her ender chip, implying that she has been keeping her new relationship a secret. She then ventures off to work, happy for the first time in months. In the next scene, when John arrives home after strolling around the city, Bernard approaches him and invites him out to another party, which is being hosted by the famous arch songster. It turns out that this guy is responsible for making all the music in New London, which is actually just music, without any lyrics. John, who has already been fed up with parties and the unwanted attention, refuses to go, but when Bernard promises to him that this will be his last one, he agrees. Elsewhere, Mustafa Mend, the most intelligent person in the land, senses that a danger is approaching the city. She wanders around the prohibited parts of New England until she reaches a dilapidated building where the Soma pills were previously manufactured. Inside, there are a bunch of computers lying around, and here it is revealed that these computers are responsible for maintaining law and order in the city, not Indra. A worried Mustafa Man checks one of the computers and finds a lot of databases altered there. Just then, her evil daughter, Lisa, approaches her from behind and reveals that she is the one who altered the databases. She did this because the people of New London have become too monotonous and irrelevant. And when Mustafa Man checks one of the books lying around, she learns that her daughter has altered a very dangerous database in the Indra chip, which will now enable people to commit the unthinkable. Elsewhere, Bernard and John get dressed up and head to the party which is being hosted by the arch sangster. Apparently, a game called Frolic is going to be played, where the alphas will chase the betas and have intercourse with them if they are caught. Bernard is very excited about playing, but John is in no mood, because all he thinks about now is Lenina. However, despite his wishes, they meet the creepy arch sangster, who appears to be perplexed by John's appearance. He had hoped the savage to be large and scary, but it turns out that he is small and weak, just like the Epsilons. John is greatly angered by these words, but he keeps his cool and doesn't take any action. Soon, the game begins and John and Bernard venture into the woods. Along the way, John tries to explain that this is not life. People should have the will to date others and find their partners. With these partners, they will live for the rest of their lives and have children. However, Bernard understands none of it. So, John explains it in a simple way. He says that at first, people should find an interesting person and date them, and at the end of the day, they can decide if she was the right person. He tries to explain more, but a bored Bernard puts on his game mask and ventures off to hunt some betas. Following this, John walks through the woods alone when suddenly, he notices his love, Lenina, having intercourse with an alpha. John is obviously dejected, but he can do nothing about it. The next morning when the two meet, John expresses his dissatisfaction at the incident, but Lenina asserts that she was just following the rules. John tells her to forget the rules and live a free life. However, Lenina says that it's not so easy. If she didn't have intercourse with the alpha, Indra would come to know. This would result in their relationship being exposed, which would cause further problems. The following day, Bernard surprisingly calls Lenina to his room and inquires about where she always goes privately. But before she can answer, Bernard unexpectedly asks her out on a date. It seems as if he took John's suggestion from the night earlier and is trying to start a new relationship in a savage way. Lenina loves John a lot and doesn't want to commit to someone else, but if she doesn't say yes to Bernard, she will get exposed. Hence, she reluctantly agrees to the date. They get on a private jet and fly off to a private island, where the perfect stage has been prepared for a romantic dinner. However, things don't go quite according to plan for the two. Bernard is quite into Lenina, but the latter keeps thinking about John. She wants to keep up her act, but fails because she is visibly distracted. Bernard sees through her eyes and gets enraged. Hence, he screams at her to leave the room, and then breaks down in tears. Elsewhere, John searches the whole area for Lenina, but she is nowhere to be found. Hence, he goes to the Epsilon section to have some beer. But when the waitress refuses to give him alcohol, he smashes a glass on the floor. As expected, the Epsilons quickly start cleaning the floor, as it is their job, but John instructs them to not do so. He then gives a lecture about how the alphas are getting all the comfort and luxury, while the Epsilons are made to do the hard work, as if they are slaves. He also tells everyone to rise up and stop being Epsilons, but rather be normal people. Saying this much, he prepares to leave, but just then, C-Jack 60 also smashes a glass on the floor. Soon, all the Epsilons follow suit and start trashing the place, implying that they have had enough and are ready to revolt. Shortly after, John finally meets up with Lenina, and the two have an emotional reunion. However, he is fed up with being sad, so he goes to Watson to ask for help. He inquires if she can alter someone's memory, to which she says yes. Part 2 ends as John finally puts on the optical chip. Subscribe to see more videos like this, turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Don't forget to watch Part 3. Thanks for watching.